Hello and welcome to Inspire's Unplugged Dialogue series. Inspire is a Horizon Europe project that started in October 2022 and will finish at the end of September 2026. The aim of Inspire is to create the European Centre of Excellence on inclusive gender equality in research and innovation. And Inspire really has two main aims. Firstly, to build up the evidence base on how to integrate an intersectional perspective into gender equality plans, as well as providing practical support to 12 communities of practice of approximately 90 organisations working together to design, implement and evaluate an inclusive change process. So we're very lucky today to have Mary Ann Danowitz here with us. Mary Ann is a Fulbright Senior Specialist. She's also on the advisory board for Inspire, and she has a great deal of experience, both academically as well as a university administrator, pushing forward a change process. She's currently an Emerita professor and dean at North Carolina State University. Welcome, Mary Ann, and thanks for being with us here today.
Rachel, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward to having just a very open-ended conversation about some things that are important to all of us.
Okay, that's great. So from your point of view, why is a more inclusive research and innovation ecosystem necessary?
Well, all of us know that we live in a diverse world and in diverse societies. And it's crucial that we consider the talents and the possible contributions of all people, because without that, we're really limited and shortchanging the possibility of our doing the best to achieve our mission, whatever that might be for the organization, and to maximize the work and activities and resources that we have. Another reason is that we have an ethical and moral responsibility to include individuals. And by that, what I mean is we must make a concerted effort to recruit, develop the careers and opportunities for people, especially those that may be different from us. And we need to create an organization where all individuals, feel valued, compensated, and are rewarded fairly. A third reason that I believe that we must have more inclusive research and innovative organizations is that we live in societies that are globally interconnected. And that means having individuals that represent different cultures, histories, languages, and skill sets. And in many ways, we are a microcosm of larger societies and ecosystems. But we've got to continue and even think more about the interconnections we must make beyond our immediate sphere, where we have the predominant anchoring of our organization. And lastly, I would add that established organizations in post-Fordist nations are dominated by those who have traditionally been in leadership positions. And in most parts of the world, they tend to be well-established men who have created structures and hierarchies that they're comfortable with. So to recognize that the world is comprised of tremendous talent beyond those individuals who have traditionally dominated our research organizations and our universities, that means we must change in ways to respond to the broader part of society and the world. And that means changing cultures, practices, and policies in order to be more inclusive.
And given your expertise and experience in higher education organisational change processes, do you know of or have you been involved in any innovative interventions or promising practices that have really successfully impacted on creating a more inclusive higher education or research organisation?
Rachel, there's one that I'm really proud of and probably was the most difficult one where I experienced significant setbacks, but it's the most important one that I think I've been engaged in my entire career. Mm-hmm. And that is following George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in May 2020, mm-hmm. I was dean of a college of education that had about 2,000 students. We focused on policy, research, and teacher preparation. Most of our education was for graduate students. Mm-hmm. And we were located in North Carolina, a state that's very conservative in the South. Yeah. His murder ripped through deeper than I can remember any personal tragedy. That is a tragedy involving one person. Yeah. And I made the decision that if a college that espouses to change and improve education does not act responsibly, how can we expect anyone else to do that? Yeah. So I knew in my head and my heart that the right thing to do was to reorient the college in a profound way, to say that we would become an anti-racist college of education. Okay. That intentionally was a very public statement, yeah. And it was a statement that was high-risked in a political culture that was not necessarily responsive to that. In order to make that change, I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I involved a number of my key counterparts, and we developed a written communique to the larger college. Yeah. So it was not in my name only. Okay. And we then began an extensive change process that took 2 years and is an evolving process. But what that meant in order to bring about the change was really developing a coalition, yeah. of individuals and those who you might expect to be on board and those who not necessarily would. Mm-hmm. My greatest challenge personally was not to exhaust the faculty members who were people of color, mainly Black and brown faculty members, yeah. because they had been fighting for justice all along. They also were emotionally wounded and in pain with what had happened. And so to get them to engage, to have a leadership role, but also to be prepared to bring along many white people that did not have the consciousness about what was happening. That change process had a lot of political capital at stake. And so from time to time, I had to check in with the people above me, like the chancellor or president. Yeah. And I had to be very, very mindful of the communication that was coming out because we were beginning to experience a backlash yeah. against race in the United States. I'm pleased to say that the project had success while I was there. And one of the first things we did was to develop a policy that really gave more rights and responsibilities to students to challenge and question faculty members whom they might have thought or experienced unfairness, mm-hmm. discrimination, and the like. This had to be signed off by both faculty and students, but it really was a policy process that we used to then open up the feelings and issues that had been built up for many years. Those feelings and issues became public through open discussion groups and sessions that we had usually online because of the way the university was functioning at that time. There was backlash and I was criticized, but I also believed that I could not carry forward the name of being a change agent for the good for education without first dealing with the difficulties within our own college to step up to make the changes we had to make, to have integrity, to say we would become anti-racist, we would prepare researchers, We would prepare faculty members and we would prepare teachers to deal with one of the deeply bedded bases of discrimination in U.S. society.
Okay. So in your experience as a university administrator, what were the key factors that aided that successful change process, do you think?
The first was I had a strategy. Mm-hmm. It was very clear to me what I wanted to accomplish and to know what are the best ways to get there. And also trying to anticipate what some of the obstacles would be, some of the pushback would be. A second one was the importance of building a coalition of people who would engage in the change process. And some of those were individuals who I knew would be likely champions of the cause and who were believers from the beginning. But also it was crucial to bring along very early on individuals who had misgivings about the possibility or the value of this, and attempting to engage them in the process to open up their thinking and to change some of their views so that they could then become advocates with their colleagues, especially our full professors, who needed to be at least aware of and not in any way block the change process. A third part or piece of it was having very clear markers on the way to what the desired outcomes and the timetable would be. These needed to be communicated openly and regularly to keep the item in the forefront of people's minds, and also to be aware of what the different steps were in the process and how they could engage in each of those steps. A fourth area was that we developed what I would call critical friends from qualitative research, using that language. That is, there were people that I could always count on for constructive feedback early on to try to avoid some of the public mistakes that I could have easily made as a white woman trying to focus on leading a transformation of an organization to deal more effectively with racism. And I would add to that when I made mistakes on the way, or when someone makes mistakes on the way of changing, to admit as early on that you're aware of the mistake and to acknowledge it and to try to learn from it and go beyond that. And lastly, I would say that as an individual who has responsibilities as a director, a department head, or other administrator, to be aware of the extent to which you should be informing the individuals that you report to or accountable for and to, and making decisions when it's important to inform them or talk things through with them, and when it's important to go ahead with something without informing them and be willing to face the consequences or the pushback that could come from that. So those would be my key points that I've learned, and I hope others could learn from in trying to institute change.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. And when you were implementing the change process, what were the main factors that you came across that really sort of hindered the change process?
The first part was the fear and uneasiness of students and our faculty, especially racial minorities, to come forward and talk about the inequity and prejudice and discrimination they had experienced. Mm-hmm. This was really very, very difficult, especially for some of our early career faculty, because they were making themselves vulnerable, and they didn't know whether it would bring about change, but they were also aware that their vulnerability could affect their career advancement as they were at times pointing out not only systemic inequities, but I would say the behavior of some of the senior faculty.
Okay. So how did you get their trust?
Relying on my faculty colleagues whom they would trust, and my acknowledgement that I had a lot to learn and that we all needed to do better, including myself. And that I was willing to learn and make mistakes through the process.
And thinking a little bit more globally, what do you think Europe can learn from the US and the Canadian experiences of implementing EDI policies in higher education institutions and research organisations?
I think one of the things that the US did is it shifted early on from its work on equal opportunity to focus on gender and to focus on race. That was always done separately. And progress was made, but it really has fallen short of what it needs to be. The EU has the advantage of having more than a two-decade commitment to gender equality, beginning with the mainstreaming efforts.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that it's important to keep the course with gender.
Yeah.
And not go back, but also to look very, very carefully what are the creative processes and ways of recognizing the differences that we need to deal with in terms of different discrimination and how to bring that together. I think that EDI is not the solution because it's really a little bit of everything without full satisfactory for any group that has been treated unfairly or has historically been disadvantaged. So I think the U.S. did not make the connection to the larger social context in which universities and research organizations have been located, but really focused much more internally rather than dealing with the external environment. So I think the stronger links and connections that could be made with community groups, that could be made with antecedent experiences that people coming into the organization might have, or opening doors to allow and encourage and welcome people who have historically been excluded from that organization.
And during recent decades, the European Commission has invested in combating gender inequalities in research and innovation, like you just mentioned. But more recently, yes, the terminology has shifted from gender equality to more inclusive gender equality. What do you understand by this shift?
I'm trying to understand it more fully than I do right now. But my understanding now is that we're looking at gender equality as a principal dimension that has been recognized as important. Great work has been done on it. And it's really, in many ways, been incorporated and in some cases institutionalized in terms of work that needs to be done. So in terms of inclusive gender equality, I look at the interface of a commitment to gender along with other dimensions that result in inequality, be it nationality, be it ethnicity, be it age, and considering how one can go forward to address those inequities in relationship to gender. So a case in point might be how to especially attend to disability of GLBTQ academic staff and students. And that may not necessarily be seen as in the center of gender, but it is a very complex interrelationship that we need to recognize and honor and to be more inclusive of in our organizations.
Okay, that's great, Mary Ann. Thanks very much for being here today and sharing your thoughts on these important issues.
Thank you, Rachel. It's my honor and privilege to be here, and I do want to add that I believe that Inspire is an incredibly important project. The complexity of it at times is overwhelming, but the task that it's set out to do is increasingly important, especially as we face a shift to more conservative orientations in many of our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.